Hey there, everyone, and welcome to another episode of the Commute podcast, a conversational podcast exploring the stories, insights, and strategies behind learning-centric communities. Our mission is to inspire listeners by highlighting individuals who are shaping the future of how people come together to learn, grow, and thrive. I am thrilled today to host Channél Jordan. She is a creative visionary, digital storyteller, and community builder. Chanél's innovative approach to brand storytelling and empowering authentic self-expression through the lens of culture, fashion, and history gives us invaluable insights into entrepreneurship, leadership, and building engaged communities. Channél, it's awesome to have you here today. How are you doing?
Thank you for having me. I'm excited. I'm doing well. I'm doing well. It's a beautiful day. It's like almost 60 degrees. So I'm good. I'm good. How are you?
I'm doing well. Yeah, we'll take the nice weather here in the Northeast after probably one of the chilliest Februaries on record. So
Yeah.
it's awesome to have you on the show. So, Channél, I'd love to start by learning a bit more about your background. I'm always drawn to folks that have leveraged creative mediums to tell their stories and foster a sense of belonging. And
Mhm.
it's one of the areas where I'm really not maybe the strongest. I don't have those skills in my toolbox, so I'm always curious to learn kind of what experiences shaped individuals who have had those journeys. So yeah, please tell us more about yourself.
Yeah, of course. It's so interesting because I'm in a creative position now professionally, but I actually studied poli-sci and psychology when I was at Rutgers. And um, I graduated and I realized that maybe I think it was a myriad of things. It was the pandemic, facing my mortality, realizing that life was very short and that I wanted to pursue things that made me feel good. And so I found that through fashion, but it really harkens back to when I was younger, and I always love telling this story, but I'm sure people will be like, "Chanel, you need to stop telling this story. We've heard it a million times." But when I was younger, probably like early elementary school, we did a research project on the meaning of our names. And I remember going to the computer lab. I was really excited. I was like, yeah, I'm going to research my name. And we Googled it. And what came back was your name, Chanel, means a waterway or a canal or what have you. And I was so confused, of course, as an elementary schooler. I was like, what does that even mean? Because, some people, they have names that mean like ray of light or son of God or something. I was so disappointed with the meaning of that name. But I did further digging and found out that I share the same name with Gabrielle Chanel, who is the founder of the Chanel brand. And even years later learned that I was actually named after the perfume Chanel number 5, which anyone that knows African immigrant women from the 90s, that was like their jam. So I say all of this to say the meaning of names, they hold power, they hold meaning. And so it kind of always felt destined because at that point I was like, oh, I'm gonna be a fashion designer. I'm gonna draw and I'm gonna create clothing and I'm gonna do all those things. And then I think for different reasons I chose a different career path. I think just being young and being interested in a lot of different things and whatnot. And then ended up going to school pre-med psych and then switching to poli-sci and all of these different things and really trying to find my path along the way. But I came back to fashion because it was a way of creative expression. And as opposed to creating clothing, I'm creating community, but still being able to pursue uh, an industry that I'm interested in and pursue a creative career in which I can support Black creatives like myself, but also just make sure that people have the resources that they need. And I think overall, my goal throughout all of the interest that I've had professionally, it's always been about helping people and reaching people in a way that makes an impact.
There's so much of what you just shared, Chanel, that resonates with me because when I was growing up, I was the only person with my name.
Mm,
And, we had those. I can relate exactly to what you're describing, where there's an exercise, everybody in the classroom. We had to go to our entire elementary school had one computer lab. This is for kids
yeah.
that grew up in the
Mhm.
90s, right? So we were all kind of in computer lab class together, learning how to type and learning how to do different things. And
Mm.
there was a lesson or a class in which we had to do a genealogy of our names, right? My name is not a familiar name to the average American, right? So growing up, I was always aware that my name meant happy. It means happiness and joy in Arabic. And I'm not a native Arabic speaker either, right? So it's my identity and my name, it reflects this kind of cosmopolitan, almost intersection of different cultures, religions, and identities, right? So as a Bangladeshi who is Muslim, the we have a lot of Arabic names culturally, uh, and it's just that's just how it's been for centuries, right? So as I started digging more into my past and the genealogy of my name, etc., what I stumbled upon was something very interesting, which is that my name, even though it's cross-cultural, people from Morocco to Malaysia have my name, but that it's actually pronounced differently depending on where you are. So my
Mm.
family's from Bangladesh, and we pronounce it, Farhan. Just there's no because we don't have a long A or a short A in our language. We just have
Mm.
one A, right? Kind of like English. Uh, but when I interacted with folks from different countries, they would pronounce my name differently because it was actually written in their languages with either a short A or a long A, and as a result, the pronunciation changed. Um, so yeah, it's a really interesting. I almost feel like we should all embark on that exercise, right? Of self discovery, and it starts with our name. It starts with first and last, right? Where do we hail from? What is the meaning of our name? What culture or historical you know identities are associated with our names? Very very powerful. Thank you for sharing that, Chanel.
Thank you. Thank
Yeah. Another thing that I really want to be able to discuss with you, Chanel, is the idea of providing resources. You touched
you.
on it at the very end of what you were sharing about your journey. What is it that you think communities today that are centered on creative expression, what is it that they really need that maybe our audience members, if they're curious about this topic, they would be able to serve as a resource or be able to provide uh, that potential need?
Money.
Okay.
That's really like to keep it 100 money. I mean,
Money.
I'm
Mm.
thinking about a lot of the organizations that I've worked with, either in the fashion or art industry, in which the ideas are there, the people are showing up to the events, the people are supporting. We're building community in that way that it's very grassroots. It's very much we're going to show up. If we got to put the painting on the wall ourselves, we'll put the painting on the wall ourselves. Or if we have to do the setup and we have to do the packing and unloading and all of those things, we'll do it. Um, and so, really, the across everything, especially when it comes to serving communities of colors or serving communities that have been historically underrepresented or marginalized, a lot of times the main thing that they need is money because the people are showing up. Like I said, the people are coming together. They're working on building the things that they've always built for centuries when they didn't have the resources. And so, really, if you're interested in supporting creative communities, you should put your money where your mouth is. It's seeing young gallery owners and making sure that they have the resources that they need in order to be functional and to be uh, a welcoming and safe environment for everyone there, whether it's the staff, whether it's the gallery attendees, and same for all of the other creative spaces that I've existed in. But I think also, aside from money, which is kind of the obvious answer, I think it's just authenticity. I think it's a genuineness that allows for community to grow in a way that flourishes and that sustains itself past whatever selfish, self-centered reason that people may enter into community with one another, because I've also been in community with people where they start the creative thing and They start it for notoriety, they start it for fame, they start it for fortune, and then, or even if they don't start off like that, they kind of turn into that. And so really I just think that when we're approaching community building, for people who maybe are on the outside looking in, thinking how can I support physically showing up, but also again spending money with these organizations, making sure they're well resourced, but also for the people that are attending, but the people that are also building the community internally, it's about authenticity and genuineness and making sure that no matter what, that you are always remembering the mission of what you're doing and what you're building.
The authenticity piece is something that I'm continuing to come across in all of my
Mm.
various conversations that I'm having with community builders. I think it's incredible that you're kind of centering on that piece, right? Money is the oxygen. Of course, we need money to sustain initiatives and be able to apply for grants and all the other ways that we can fund the various projects that we're undertaking. But authenticity, it's a recurring theme. And what you just mentioned right now about staying central to the mission, I think of it as the North Star of any
Mhm.
community, right? What are we driving towards? What is the impact that we are laser focused on building uh, and sustaining and really nurturing, right? So tell me a bit more about that, Chanel. When you started building these communities, did you really hone in on that mission early on? And then, if so, how did you put it together? And how is it potentially revisited as your communities have grown?
Yeah. Even when I was working in the legal field, I, for people that know me, they know that a lot of times I'll say, live your truth. People will do something and they'll be like, oh, I'm sorry. And I'm like, no, live your truth. And it's always like, I'm not saying it in a pejorative way, or I'm not saying it in a way to be patronizing or to belittle someone. It's literally like, you made a mistake or you did something that was authentically you. Who am I to judge? Live your truth. And even if I am judging, why the fuck does it matter? And I think for me, that's just always kind of been something that I've tried to stick to as I've gone on this journey to enter the creative community. When I was working in the legal field and I was telling other people to live their truth, I wasn't always listening to that. I was like, I have to stay here and I have to work the job and I have to do the thing. And then I think, again, with the pandemic, it kind of allowed me to realize that we, while life can be long and beautiful and just filled with everything that you would need or want from it, life can also be very short and cruel and unnecessarily sometimes unfair. And so I was really faced with this idea of, if I'm going to live my truth, that means doing it or trying to do it in all aspects of my life. And so I remember I would tell people to live their truth. And so when I started the kind of the first iteration of my content creation in 2021 when I was still working in the legal field. And for me, that was just really a way to enter the fashion industry as someone who didn't study fashion, who didn't have a background in it. Well, I had a background in it. It was something that I was interested in, something that I'd explored casually, really, when I was younger. But getting older, I was like, this is something that I want to do, and this is something that feels true and authentic to me. And I wanted to do it in such a way where, yeah, I want to talk about clothes, and yeah, I want to talk about how we look in the clothes and how we feel in the clothes, but I also want to make sure that people have the context of what they're wearing, the historical context of what they're wearing. And to me, that felt more authentic than getting online and being like, this is what's in and this is what's not. Not to say that there's anything wrong with that. There are people who study those things and actually know what they're talking about. But I think a lot of times people, especially, look at creative industries and they just assume that because they're not at a 9 to 5, or they're not doing things in what would be deemed the traditional way, that maybe they're not working. And so for me, it's always been about finding ways to express myself that feel good, that make me feel good, that make my community feel good, and making sure that I'm doing it in such a way that minimizes harm and focuses on, again, that mission of authenticity. And, if I don't feel like posting, I don't post. If I don't want to make the video, I don't make the video. I mean, there was a period between 2021 and 2024 where I didn't post. I like maybe posted like once or twice, but it was just really like I have so many other things to focus on. I'll get back to it when I get back to it. And then also, I think really just centering the mission is also understanding that while I'm doing this to authentically express myself, I'm also doing it so that I can help other people authentically express themselves and help them live their truth and stand in their authenticity and their genuineness and their passion about whatever creative thing it is. So if you love geology and rocks, live your truth. If you love astrology and whatever other thing that may seem weird or perplexing to other people, as long as you're passionate about it and you feel good about what you're doing and you're minimizing the harm that you're doing, I think you'll always be able to remain centered in the work, which is for me educating people and providing access to fashion history and fashion knowledge and fashion context about the clothes that we're wearing. I hope that answered your question.
That was a very comprehensive answer, Chanel. And I think again, it's about, I think when you live your truth, when you live authentically, and you start creating and producing content and empowering other people to live their truth, which is what you're describing, I think that's what naturally becomes the fuel to grow your community, right?
Mm,
And I think your growth as not only a community leader and somebody who has been able to nurture these awesome spaces for individuals to share in that passion that you have, I think that's a testament to that, right? So I think ongoing, moving forward, you'll this mission will continue to be the kind of guiding light for everybody that finds your work and chooses to join you on this journey. I think that's very empowering. Uh, Something that I'd love to learn about, Chanel, which again will illustrate a bit of my, I guess, lack of knowledge in these domains, is tell me more about this idea of the history of what we're wearing. I looked at some of your recent Instagram posts actually, and saw that you've created content on this idea of, I think, the clothes that we wear, kind of to go back to the idea of who we are in our names, right? The clothes
mhm.
that we wear also harken back to the history of who we are as individuals and who we are culturally. So yeah, share a little bit more about that. What stories can that unravel for us?
Yeah, I think, and sometimes one of the biggest gripes that I have with the proliferation of content creators, again, I want people to live their truth and have fun and do their thing, but sometimes I think we get so caught up in the trends and creating content just to create content, or creating content just to get brands to pay attention to us, and to get on the PR list and to be invited to shows and all of those different things, that we forget that fashion and style oftentimes tells more about you than what you could tell people. The first thing that you see about people may be their smile, maybe their face, but you may see what coat they're wearing. You may see what shoes they're wearing. You may see that they're wearing a hat or they're wearing gloves, and it may tell you that, oh, they work in this field, or maybe they do this and they have a briefcase, they work corporate, or they're just someone that they need to have their laptop on them. And I think fashion reveals so much about us before people even get to say, hi, my name is blank. And so for me, really, when talking about fashion history in particular, I really want us, when we are assessing fashion trends and things that are popular in the zeitgeist currently, that we also recognize that there is a long storied history of why that thing is existing in the way that it's existing now. For example, last year for Fashion History Month, or it was Black History Month and it was Fashion Week, and so I always call it like Black Fashion History Month for me. And it's when Cowboy Carter was about to drop and all of these different things, and people were like, well, Beyonce is gentrifying cowboys and she's culturally appropriating and all these things. But it's like, when you understand the history of cowboy culture and you understand that the fact that the word cowboy was used as a derogatory term for black cowhands, and you trace that history through the development of Western wear into Southern culture in particular, and why there is a lot of black cowboys, especially in the South, you can understand why Beyonce made a Cowboy Carter album, or why she's exploring country music right now. Fashion also doesn't just inform you, or understanding fashion and understanding its history doesn't just inform you about clothing, it informs you about other cultural movements. So for me, being able to really draw that through line is important so that we can really understand the world around us and what's happening.
Yeah, there's so much that our, as you were speaking, what came to mind for me was how big an impression, a first impression, what we wear makes, right? We're always taught in kind of the corporate world, first impressions. Somebody makes a judgment call on who you are
Mm-hmm.
within the first, I don't know, couple of seconds of seeing you, right? Everything from your body language to your handshake to what you're wearing. And I remember reading somewhere that shoes are the first thing that people pay attention to when they see you. I'm not sure if that's scientifically backed or if I'm just making this up from some thing I read and God knows when, right? But it's very telling, right? Because it's again this idea of your profession, your social status, all of these kind of maybe subconsciously, right? We're wired as a species to make judgment calls or make reach decisions about who we are and what we do based off of what we are wearing and how we're perceived visually. One of the things that I personally would love to learn more about, Chanel, and I think you're the perfect person to ask this question, is history and identity and how fashion has shaped, I think, the American experiment.
Mm-hmm.
It's a really meta topic, but if you could share with our listeners just a few maybe major takeaways, some of the learnings that you've walked away with. I think the Cowboys example was brilliant because I actually didn't know that the term originated as a very derogatory way to refer to black cowhands, right? So, what other takeaways have you been able to learn in your exploration of fashion and history and identity?
Yeah, I think one of the most poignant things that I think about is um, really the development of ballroom culture and voguing and queer culture through like the early 1900s, but specifically through like the 60s and 80s, and what it meant to be a part of ballroom culture and what it meant to be a part of a house, meaning a voguing house. And a lot of these houses often are named after fashion houses. And these are people who sometimes, not all the times, but also most of the times, come from communities that are low income, historically underrepresented, in a very elitist fashion space. And this idea about walking for a category and walking for a ball and being dripped in extravagance and doing everything you can to create an outfit or clothing that reflects who you want to be as opposed to maybe your current circumstances. So that's always something that has really stuck with me, just this idea of sometimes we don't dress as who we are, sometimes we dress as who we want to be or who we hope to become. So that's always
Yeah.
something that I've really thought about. And then really I just think about how, again, fashion informs community and community informs fashion. Thinking about the idea of the Black Panthers, and they had a very specific uniform that they wore. It was usually all black, it was a leather jacket, it was afros, it was maybe a hat. It was a lot of different things, but like when you think of a Black Panther, you typically think of that outfit, and that was a group of people who were organized around a common goal of Black liberation in the United States by any means necessary. And so I think a lot of times when we are assessing fashion, it's really about looking at these like different cultural norms, and it can again inform us about the communities that we are looking at or that we are a part of or that we hope to be a part of.
Yeah, there's so much in the historical narrative that I think, I was a history major in
Mm-hmm.
college, right? And I remember, I think looking back on it, so much of my knowledge acquisition and the scholarship that I was engaged in was really black and white, right? It was very much, a series of events led to this outcome. Let's
Mm-hmm.
dissect the historical trajectory of that outcome, right? Very much kind of portrayed in a cause and effect type of dichotomy. But history, as I reflect on it, having been a graduate now for over uh, 15, 14 years at this point that I left college, right? In the intervening 14 years, the lived experience that I've been able to really, I think, benefit from has taught me that you have to thrive in the gray, right?
Mm-hmm.
Nothing is really black and white in when it comes to our lived experiences and our lives, right? So there's so much nuance
Mm-hmm.
to who we are, our identities, our histories, our passions, what we stand for, our authenticity. I think in many ways, it's about, and I think it's an evolving exercise, right? Because who I was 5 years ago is different from who I am today, and what I value today, what I celebrate today. I think the fundamentals are still the same.
Yeah.
Again, based on my upbringing and kind of who I am, certain things won't change, but the nuances change, and how I view myself and others also changes. Um, I'd love to hear your thoughts around that, Chanel.
Yeah, no, that's such a really great point, and I know we've talked about, especially on like TikTok, the personal style conversation has been, we've spoken about it ad nauseum, and I think I think a lot of us are just like, okay, let's stop talking about personal style, but I will talk about personal style again because of the fact that I think, there again, as we are looking at current fashion trends and all of these cores, there's corp core, there's cottage core, there's Barbie core, there's brat core. There are all of these things that are really trying to essentially create a community through clothing, through shared ideals and things like that. But sometimes I think people are so rigid in how they approach their style. They're like, I'm Barbie core through and through, and everything has to be pink, and everything has to be this, and I have to be blonde, and I have to do this. Whereas I think a lot of times people don't give themselves the grace to understand that you may be Barbie core one day, and then you may be emo core or corp core the next. My style varies throughout the week. There may be a day where I'm just in my sweats and I'm not leaving the house, or there may be a day where I'm wearing my really nice expensive shoes out with my really other nice expensive pieces. But those are all still parts of me, and I think the tunnel vision with social media is that if you pick something, you have to stay in it. And I can get it because, especially when we're looking at communities of previous, if you were part of the punk crowd, you typically hung out with punk people. But I think there's just a lot of rigidity in how people approach style and how people approach fashion. And again, to your point, you're not the same person that you were 5 years ago, 14 years ago. You don't dress the same. You probably don't even think about clothes in the same way that you did when you were younger. And it's the same with me. So I think we all get so caught up in the I have to look a certain way all the time, or I have to pick one thing and I have to stay in that, when in actuality style is personal because it is about the personalization and it's about identity building, and it's also about sometimes like your clothes don't always reflect your identity. Sometimes you may be like glitz and glam, but like you're at home, and that's fine. There's a duality to it, there's nuance to it. And to the point that you were making, especially when we look at history and we look at the history of clothing has a lot more nuance than what it does for people and what it does for communities and what it does on like a global market or scale. And when you realize that history and when you learn that history, it will also change how you interact with yourself, how you interact with the people around you, and how you interact with the clothes that you wear.
I think that's brilliantly said, Chanel. And so much of it, I think, is really this idea of, you know, conformity has defined fashion trends,
Mhm.
perhaps more so than it should. One of the takeaways that I'm really walking away with, and one of the learnings from this conversation is, again, the authenticity drives the sense of belonging that I think fuels communities and living
Mhm.
your truth, right?
Mhm.
But I think fundamentally fashion is about not conforming, right?
And you know what? Here's the thing. I will also say sometimes fashion is about conforming. Sometimes we are obsessed with our perception and wanting to be in the in group, and that's okay. But I think I would
Mm,
like more people to be honest about it. And again, like
sure.
that's not to say again, we talked about the Black Panthers. They had a very specific uniform. Punk, they have a very specific uniform. There are communities that have a very specific uniform. But I think the
Hmm.
thing for me when it comes to living authentically in your style and living authentically in yourself is that, are we actually assessing whether or not we want to be Barbie core? Like, I think everybody should try something once, but sometimes I feel like people are forcing it because of the
Mm.
fact that they see its proliferation on social media. And so they think they have to do it, as opposed to being like, okay, I did it. It's not really my thing. I'm going to try something else and I'm going to evolve and I'm going to move. Or, you know yourself so well where you're like, yeah, I already know that's not for me. I don't need to try it. I don't need to buy into it. I have my set standards of what I like and what I don't like.
Yeah, no, that's I think a very valuable point to make. There's there's advantages to being with the crowd, and then there's a real beauty and a real sense of exploration and evolution when you're kind of charting your own path when it comes to fashion, right? So yeah, no, that's a great way to think about it. There's all these dualities that I expose, to myself as I have these conversations, which is really wonderful. For somebody who is an aspiring creator, Chanel, what would you share in terms of takeaways? Your experiences over the past, I'd say maybe more than a decade at this point, have shaped who you are and the way that you've been able to nurture communities. Somebody listening who's interested in doing something similar, what would you say that they do?
You have to start. You have to start. You have to, and this is something that I've also struggled with is that, I mean, I'm thinking about this idea. I've had this idea for a video for probably like 2 or 3 years now. It's been like, okay, I just have to do it. And then I don't do it. And I think a lot of times the difference between someone who's a consumer and who is a producer is that the producer is actually doing the thing. They're not just consuming media. They're not just watching the TikTok videos or watching the YouTube videos or reading books or watching documentaries or listening to music. They're also doing the things to influence the zeitgeist, to learn about the zeitgeist and then influence the zeitgeist in some sort of way. And I think the number one thing that I will always tell people who are creatives or who want to be creatives is that if you have the idea, you do the thing. And I think you are like the perfect example of that because you were like, hey, I have this thing that I want to do. I'm going to do it. And we're here now and we're doing it. We're recording the podcast right now. And
Yeah.
so, if you have an idea for a podcast, if you have an idea for a thing, do it. And, I get it. There is sometimes an oversaturation of media, and we're consuming more media than we ever have now. But also, like, who's going to beat your ass if you start the podcast? Who's going to beat your ass if you start the magazine, or if you start the community collective, if you start the book club, if you start sewing, if you start posting things online? I think if you want to be a creator, you have to create.
Yeah, take that leap of faith, right?
Mhm.
Don't be afraid, because I think, and I was told for a long time, probably longer than I'd like to admit, that I should do something like what I'm doing now, right?
Mm.
Because this is something that I'm very passionate about. And I was told, XYZ, got a lot of feedback from a lot of different folks, but ultimately it came down to having that courage to really just create and see what's out there, right? And it's been a really awesome journey. I mean, the past 6 weeks that this podcast has been up, and I hope to be able to do many more episodes. Uh, what are some of the ways that you think, Chanel, people who are hesitant to take that leap of faith? I want to end on this because I love to share some key calls to action, if you will,
Mm.
whenever possible. How do you overcome that hesitation, or, folks may be interested in doing what you're doing, or, a version thereof, a variant thereof. How do you make that leap of faith?
You do it scared. You do it anxious. You do it imperfectly. You just do it. I
Mm-hmm.
think for me, it's really about putting your faith in the universe that it will carry you through. I'm non-denominational, so I believe in every god and all gods and no gods. So for me, it's just about whoever you believe in, whether it's yourself or whether it's the universe. Are you putting enough faith in yourself or in that thing or in that person to be able to follow through on something that you would like to do? Sometimes
Yeah.
you are going to post the video and it's going to do terribly. It's going to get like 20 views, and you're going to be like, I just spent
Yeah.
like 3 hours making this thing and it only got 20 views, and like
Yeah.
crazy.
Yeah.
But I think the thing that you always have to remember is that things take time. Like I'll use Chapel Roan as an example. Chapel Roan has been in the music business since she was like 16 or something like that. Maybe not that young, but she's been making music for a very, very long time, at least a decade at this point. And it's only now within like the past 2 years, really, that she's had the what people would say to be success of a pop star, of a musician. And a lot of people, they will not be with you shooting in the gym for the first 8 years of your career. You will be doing
Mm-hmm.
it by yourself, or you will be doing it with the people that you are building community with. But again, you
Yeah.
just have to do it. You have to believe that it is something worth pursuing. I mean, I was working in the legal industry and I was miserable. And I
Mm.
remember it was, what was that? I think it was November of 2022. I was coming up on my 1 year anniversary of being at the law firm that I was at. And I was like, I just have to make it a full year. And then I was like, no, the fuck I don't. No, I don't. I don't have a plan. I don't know what I'm doing. I just know that I don't want to be
Yeah.
doing this right now. And so I
Yeah.
quit. I didn't know what I was going to do. I was like, I have bills to pay. I have all these things to do, da 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 da. But it was about understanding that if I am clued into who I am as a person, that things will work out in the way that they need to, regardless, especially if I work for it. At the end of the day, you have to be afraid and do it anyway. You have to have faith, you have to do the thing, and then you have to do it imperfectly, and then iterate and then learn and grow as you're doing it, as opposed to trying to build behind the scenes and then release something perfect to the world. That
Yeah.
is never going to get you to the places that you need to be if you don't start now. You could either start now and do the thing now, or you could start 5 years from now. Or I will say, you could start now and do it imperfectly now and take 5 years to build your craft, or you could do the learning and growing that you have to do behind the scenes and then only start 5 years from now. But 5 years are going to pass anyway. So,
Yeah,
what are you going to do with the time that you have? And I think
that's
really we
right.
should be using it wisely and being afraid and doing it anyway.
Yeah, no, as I reflect on the arc of this conversation, Chanel, I think there's a couple of key things that I walk away with. First is authenticity. I think authenticity is key to knowing who you are and what you represent and your lived experience and what you bring to others. I think the second theme would be evolution. I love the idea of exploration and evolution maybe together. I'm going to cheat there and say it's kind of two items. And the third is conviction. I think having the conviction, having the courage to really put yourself out there as you're exploring, as you're evolving, and not losing sight of that authentic self, right? And being able to revisit, who you are, have those conversations as you nurture these communities, kind of go back to the mission, right? Of why are we together and what are we building, and be able to have that conversation with yourself and others as your community evolves, as your own lived experiences evolve. I think there's a tremendous amount of value that you can build and generate for yourself and others if you kind of follow those principles. Uh, where can people find your work, Chanel?
I am at Love Coco Joe, LoveCocojo, across all social media platforms, maybe even Tumblr, even though I haven't really been on there in a while. But yeah, I'm there across on Instagram, Twitter, because it will always be Twitter in my heart. I will never call it X.
Same here.
Pinterest, TikTok, all those things, and then my website, ChanelJordan.com. I'm still building it. I'm still adding things.
We'll put
Thank you.
all these links in the show notes, but no, it's a really bold reflection of who you are, Chanel. Yeah,
Thank you. I appreciate that.
absolutely. Is there anything else you'd like to share with our audience? Anything that I missed out on, or any other takeaways?
No, I'll just say, like, again, I will leave people with the idea of living your truth. Live your truth today, tomorrow, and always.
That's going to be the title of the episode. I think that much is certain, Chanel. Thank you so much, and it was awesome having you.
Thank you for having me. This is really, really great. I really appreciate you reaching out.
Absolutely.